Okay, so the first thing we can talk about for Lord of the Flies is the plot. What do you guys think about it? Like, what's it about?
Okay, well, the book starts off with introducing Ralph. He's on an island so far on his own, but then he finds Piggy in the forest. So after a while, they manage to get on the beach, and Ralph finds in the water a conch, which he then learns he could use to make a really loud sound. And after he does that, he tracks a bunch of other kids that were lost in the forest.
Yeah.
We later learn that there was a plane crash of some sort, or some sort of crash, and they all kind of like managed to get on the island, and there's only kids left. And Ralph tries to set up a tribe of some sort, or some sort of monarchy. So like he wants to be at the top.
Yeah, and they let him choose.
Yeah, and then one of the group members, his name's Jake, right? Jack or Jake. He wants to kind of have his own platoon of sorts, which Ralph lets them have.
Yeah, and the hunters.
The hunters, so they get the food and everything like that. And then they decide that they need to try to do something to gather attention. So what they do is they gather a bunch of firewood from the forest, well, kind of unintentionally. He says he needs to make a fire, and then the kids kind of go a bit crazy and make a giant bonfire, which then causes basically the total combustion of most of the island's trees.
Oh yes, I remember that part.
And it wasn't too good, and there's Piggy. Piggy was getting kind of paranoid at this part, and everybody was trying to ignore him. But then, like when he brought up the point that like one of the kids was not there anymore, and he could like possibly be in the fire, everybody was silent. And then after that, there was a time skip, and it shows Jack again. Jake, I keep forgetting his name. It shows Jack following a pig. But then when he throws the javelin, he misses, and you could see that from this time gap that obviously they weren't saved, and they're getting a bit more savage now because Jake he's basically almost fully naked. He just has shorts and a javelin, and that's basically all he has.
Okay. Well, I found like it was a good book, like for the most part, even though I'm not finished yet. But I found it really confusing the part with where they make the Lord of the Flies, basically with the pig on the pig's head on the stick. Like I still don't understand it completely. So that was just something
that was confusing.
Yeah. So now let's get on to the characters, I guess.
Okay.
So I read up on the SparkNotes like a couple of days ago about the characters, and I found about like what each character represents. So like the first one, Ralph, who's the protagonist, he represents like the last of civilization and wants to keep being civilized as part of on the island.
Yeah.
While Jack represents savagery and like being evil, and he's basically like what the evil within each person, right?
Yeah.
Piggy's trying to.
Yeah, Piggy's basically like the voice of reason. He helps out Ralph to make them more civilized.
Although sadly nobody really listens to him. It's kind of
he doesn't get listened to at all basically, and unfortunately when he like dies later, it's a sad death. It's like crushed by a boulder.
That was kind of funny actually.
Although I find that moment was probably the kind of like some sort of turning point because, as you said, he's like the voice of reason, and now there's no reason left.
Yeah,
there's only Ralph alone trying to keep civilization, while Jack is being kind of a mean guy. Sure, there you go.
Reading this book, I thought kind of that because they're kids living in this kind of situation, they lost their innocence, and I thought that was just when I was reading the book, I thought that was a pretty major part for me personally, and also because like. It compares civilization versus savagery. Because they're alone on the island, it's not really civilized as much as they expect it would be if they're all together. And yeah, that's why that's what I'm doing. Also,
on your point before about like how when Piggy dies, all the civilization basically goes away. Along with that, there's some symbolism in the book. Like each character represents something. Like also, Simon was he represents good and all that. Like and Roger's just like Jack's lieutenant, but. The conch, like I find it represents, like you said before, power.
Yeah.
And basically, when that was destroyed, like all the power of like or authority that people have in the regular government, when the conch is destroyed, that I thought that symbolized that all of it's gone now.
And there's no order.
Yeah, there's no order exactly.
Not everybody can have a word anymore because that's what it was used for.
Yeah.
Although, as before, Piggy never really got a word when he had it, but it's not now. It's basically purely ruled by the higher ups because they're the only people being listened to and nobody else can really get a word in.
Yeah, it's an interesting story.
It is pretty interesting, although we haven't finished the book yet. We're a few pages off. Where we're currently at, Ralph is currently being chased by the savages. And to predict an ending in that is kind of hard, because if he hasn't been saved by this point in the book, he's probably not going to be saved in these last few pages, because that's kind of
So what do you think?
not believable.
Is he gonna die or?
I don't think they already killed Piggy.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're going to kill every single good part of it, unless that's what they're trying to get at, where like
Yes,
basically
yeah,
everything.
that's exactly what.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
that can be representing like
They're trying to-
civilization.
They're trying to get rid of all civilization.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. Or also, I think what happens is that at the end, instead of being killed, I think Ralph is gonna join them. Like he's gonna lose all his civilized conscience.
Yeah,
He's just gonna become a savage, just like there.
yeah, that could. It could also be related to like what's happening today, and I think Mr. Kettling made a reference to it in English class, how like basically everybody's basically being completely, how do you say it? Like in America, how nobody basically has any rights anymore, and it's all like a completely savage nation, and how there's supposedly not going to be any civilization left. This book could also be related to such a
Oh
situation.
yeah, I see that. Because
Yeah.
like, you know, people think they're civilized, but actually they're just savages. And I think that this book just represents it in a different way for us to actually understand it. I didn't actually notice that in that kind of way. How you could actually relate it to almost anything.
Yeah, well, like, I noticed also when they talk about the beast at the beginning, I don't think there actually is one, like, particular. I think it's actually the beast within, like, each person. And that was like a subtle foreshadowing of, like, what was to come in the book.
Okay.
About how, like, Jack and all the others eventually just go crazy, kill each other.
Yeah, like how, like also at the beginning, how Ralph tries to make a point of how there is no beast, but he
Yeah.
knows it, and everybody else knows that
Yeah, that's true.
there is actually something inside. Not happy.
Well, there was a couple quotes in the book that I thought were actually kind of cool. Like, I think at one point he said, well, maybe it's just us. Like, I think they maybe thought at the beginning, I remember at the beginning of the book they thought maybe there's a pilot and there's no adults. And that was a good way to explain it. Maybe it's just us. I thought that was a good way of saying it.
When looking at, like, the themes and stuff of this book, one of them is obviously civilization and savagery. I also thought, like, one of them was hope. Because the whole time, Ralph and all the people that, like Piggy, that are trying to be civilized, they're always talking about rescue. Like, that's something they never leave alone. They always want to build, like, the fire. And
Yeah.
instead of going along and hunting all the time, they just want to keep building, like, a signal fire so people can see them and eventually get rescued, even though they actually know that they're not going to.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
It's kind of lying to themselves, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
false
basically,
hope.
if you could kind of see it, maybe what Jack and all the others were doing is, like,
Trying to stay up.
it's not right, but it's not lying to themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know that they're probably not going to be rescued, and therefore they kind of just do whatever they can to stay alive.
I think Jack was like significant, and his group of hunters were like
Yeah.
significantly older, so I think they were more mature. And instead of just lying to themselves on like what they thought was going to happen, they just accepted it.
Accepted and went along, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting story.
Yes. I like how at the beginning of the story, just how they explained how he had asthma. I thought that was good. Like how he just explained like, oh, you can't run. I thought that was actually really well. I think they put, like if you check at the beginning of the book, I don't have the book with me, but anyways, it's really I like how they just put a lot of context around the characters right at the first couple pages. How whoever's first in the island doesn't want to give his name. It doesn't give his name, and he doesn't ask for the other one's name because he doesn't want to be around him. Because I guess I'm thinking it's because he thought he was annoying or whatever. I think that's just my way of seeing it. Yeah, maybe because he was upset or a lot of different ways you could see it, and I like how they explain it.
Yeah, me too. It's really well done. I find. I also like how each character in the book represents something completely different. Like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, basically something completely different for each person. Like civilization, being complete savage, like a voice of reason. Simon is just being good completely. Like he's nice to each group.
Yeah.
So he's like, I don't know how you say, like a bridge between them. Like he can talk to both.
Connection.
And of course he dies. So
Of course, everybody good has to die.
Yeah.
Which might be prediction to the ending. That may be Ralph also.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, as you said,
I actually don't know.
he might join.
But even though Costas isn't here, he told me he finished it, and he said he didn't like the book very much, but he did enjoy the ending. So you can expect a good one.
Now I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to add?
Pretty much, it's a short book with.
It is short.
It's a short
Very
book with but however, it has lots of good aspects to it. It has lots of meaning to it. Like despite it being rather confusing at times.
I think the whole book is meaning.
Yeah,
Like,
the whole book represents.
It reminds me a lot of the book we read with Miss Musa, was Animal Farm.
Yeah.
That was all like actually based on the theory of communism and how when it's in practice it doesn't work at all.
Mhm.
Like
Okay, yeah.
that's
It's
and
never true.
there's a transition in the characters how they eventually become more like how they tried not to be.
Mhm.
Right?
Which is-
and in the same thing here, they didn't want to be savages, obviously, and then at the end, most of them do become savages. And in Animal Farm, eventually, all the animals start walking on two legs, which is against the.
Yeah,
The
they,
rule, I
they
think.
become what they hate, basically.
That's
as you said.
technically not civilized for animals if it was like, if you could be
Yeah,
civilized.
exactly.
That's not how it is. It's just unorthodox. It's not how animals should act. Like, we should act civilized.
Exactly.
That's all I have to say about the book, personally.
Do you have anything else?
No, it's basically
But
just a big book of meanings.
I bet you if we read it over again, you'd find so many more symbols like we did, and some
Yeah,
different.
definitely.
Because I think that's what I like about these kind of books. You can just come up with so many different things. If you read it over and over again, there'll always be something new. And that's what I like.
Yeah,
about
there's
the
always a
stories.
different interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can interpret it so many different ways.
Like this, you could just interpret it as kids on an island going savage and crazy, or you can interpret it as civilization when it gets to a point, it's eventually going to break up and
Exactly.
these kids are going to start killing each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I think
That's about it.
Yeah.
Right?